Got it. Well, amen. It's so great to see family again. Great to see everyone. We're here for the fourth class this month, and October's over. Isn't that amazing? I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, but time seems to go quicker and quicker. I'm trying to hold on, and it's like it moves fast. But it's great to be here. Today we have a great topic to talk about, hopefully with parents and also because of family members and different people in our lives that we can really affect and help with everything having to do with same-sex attraction and all of those things that encompass it, right? Transgender and all of the different things. We're going to be sharing our hearts. Kathy MacBrien is here. She's the blonde one over there. Of course, I'm pointing and you don't know where she is, but
it's great.
Yeah, Kathy's amazing. She's part of the Strength and Weakness staff. She'll tell you a little bit about herself in a little bit, but I'm super excited to share a lot of the things that both of us, more so Kathy many years, but myself also, have learned through helping other parents with their children and seeing different things. And we just want to share our hearts and share different things that we've learned that hopefully will help and make everything a lot more at peace with God, right? In so many different ways. So why don't we get started? I'm going to share my screen. And we'll start the slideshow. So welcome for everybody. We're going to be talking about parenting, right? Understanding and certain tools that I think will help us to be able to lead with this. Obviously, these are conversations we need to have and we need to be able to pursue. And unfortunately, in so many ways, we've not been prepared until now, to the last several years. Actually, Guy has been doing this for 15 years, but it trickles and it takes time. But these conversations that need to be had with our kids, with our family, about issues of same-sex attraction and transgender and all of those other things that exist. I looked up in the, I do that every so often, every month more or less. I go into Google and I put down like how many names of gender there is, how many different genders are, and today only 74 came up. So it's changed. It seems to keep growing and growing and more names and more things. And therefore it brings more and more confusion with so many things, especially to parents trying to deal with this with our children that literally hear this every day, one way, shape, or another. Whether it's radio, whether it's movies, whether it's at school, definitely this conversation is going on. We need to be prepared. We need to be educated, and we need to have some tools on our side to be able to help them. That's the responsibility of us as parents, right? And the main thing that we want to talk about, and it's always the main focus, and actually I heard Kathy say this for the first time several years ago, was building bridges and not barriers with our children, with the people around us. Sometimes we react, sometimes we do things, and we'll talk a little bit about all that, but it's so important to really think through about everything that we say and everything that we do. Is it really building bridges and not barriers? And that's kind of what we want to help with today. Jumped ahead, of course. Here we go. I wanted to start with the scripture because obviously just to kind of put our minds in a direction. And something that I think for us in Strength and Weakness, we talk to a lot of parents about it and a lot of people about this, right? It says Hebrews 12, 1-4. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. You know, it's so important for us to understand, and we've read this scripture probably thousands of times, right? We've heard it all over the place, all the time. But something that's really important, really to try and focus on, and it says, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. There's a lot of times we're in situations that we didn't plan on being in. We're in situations that we didn't think we'd be a part of, that just don't encompass us. But the reality of it is, God knows what he does. We serve an amazing God, and we need to trust that, and we need to persevere the race marked out for us. It's not a sprint. It never is with Jesus, right? It's actually a marathon. So it's day to day learning and growing and submitting things to God through all of it, fixing our eyes on Jesus. That's basically who we have to trust, right? Because there's so many things that we feel are out of our hands, and actually they are. So all we can really do is do our part, but also just pray about things, really put them before God, really put them before Jesus, and let him kind of direct us, and trust that we're in a journey that he has us on for whatever reason. Sometimes kicking and screaming, but we got to calm down and know that he's in control, and everything will turn out okay. You know, Kathy, you want to share?
Yeah, thank you, Rolando. I mean, I think it's this is such a great opportunity to be able to speak. I have been part of the Strength and Weakness Ministries since about 2007. Guy and I have known each other for 35 years, and just our lives happened to intersect over this particular topic around 2007 when my daughter came out. And so I have two children. I was the first single mom in the church in Toronto, but I have two kids, and a son and a daughter. And my daughter came out when she was about, I don't even remember, it was so long ago, but about 16. And I just remember it being such a shock, first of all, even though not a shock for me in subject, because my mom is gay. And certainly I kind of dealt with this issue kind of from a scriptural perspective when I became a Christian, which was 36 years ago. So I kind of walked through that then, but it's so different when it's your child. I think the thing that was so startling is that how much it took for my daughter actually to come to me and speak to me and to kind of share with me, because it was so deeply emotional for her. And I was floored. I mean, I didn't see it coming. There was a part of me at first that felt, it just stops you in your tracks. I wanted to backpedal. What did I do wrong? What didn't I teach well? What didn't I say? What didn't I do? What part of my faith didn't I share with my daughter? Like how was that picture not put together properly? And for the longest time, or for, the first little bit, it was like, I felt like God had given me this opportunity to, be prepared to answer, to have the right scripture, to be able to change her mind, to somehow fix this situation that seemed to have not only her in a fair amount of distress, but also, this all of a sudden collided with my convictions. So it was, I felt at first like I had to have all these things to say. I felt a lot of pressure. But then I realized that it was the thing that kept kind of going through my head, because instinctually, in my head, I wanted to have all the answers. In my heart, I just wanted to protect her. I wanted to protect her from judgment. I wanted to protect her from this journey that she'd kind of started herself on. And I just found that I just kept going over in my head, build bridges and not barriers. And I knew that, once I kind of stopped and really started to think about it, it was like it had a minute to myself to kind of process all these feelings. It gave me a moment to really look at what I believed. Did I believe that God was patient with me, that he had enough patience to kind of to wait for me until my heart woke up? I mean, I grew up in a completely pagan household, had no real religious background, and God was patient with me. Did I believe it firmly enough that that God knew how far I could fall, and how much, and how far I could fall, and that I would fall and could fall even through my Christian life, that God's grace was sufficient for me? Did I believe that? Did I believe that God would never, ever, ever walk away from me? And I thought coming to all of those kind of conclusions allowed me to be able to interact with my daughter, because I thought, you know what? I can't be any different than God is with me, with her. I knew that when I was in sin, and certainly I've been in sin over these last years on and off, we all go through, make choices, right? God never walked away from me. He was never far away from me. He never wagged his finger at me. He never bashed me over the head with the scriptures. He never went away from me. So I thought, you know what, this path, like Rolando said, this race marked out for me was to walk beside my daughter. And it was hard. And like Rolando said, I learned things that seriously I never really needed to know, things, I just didn't know that stuff. I experienced things. My daughter also, she had a number of relationships with women, and then went into some very, very kind of dark mental health places. She was cutting for a while, and she was suicidal for all of that kind of stuff for a while, and it was heartbreaking and frightening. And it was, but I had to walk with her, and it was, and really, that whole mantra, building bridges and not barriers, sometimes I really came to believe that it was love that was going to build that bridge. And I know God has a long game. I know he does. At this point, neither of my children are all that interested in God, but God's in for the long game. So I figured I'm just going to keep building a bridge and just going to keep loving and serving and expressing God through me. And I know that God lives in those times when I'm silent. And that I just listen. God is present in those times that I serve her, that I serve her friends, that I've had, it's just been, I've just tried to gather her to me, because I thought if she comes back over the bridge, I want there to be nowhere on that bridge there's an "I told you so." So I've really, really tried to just really be gentle. And it's not, I've put my foot in it many times, but again, it's like in my journey, I've been able to extend grace, and she knows I extend grace to her, but I've also been able to ask her for grace as I've processed through this as well. So it is quite a journey, and it continues. And, the neat thing about this ministry is that we come across parents that are in all different places. I mean, my daughter right now is almost 40. So we've been on this road for a while. So, but it's, like we're all in different places. And also, like Rolando said, our kids are being bombarded with options that the world is presenting to them that are like, it's hard to even imagine sometimes the things that our kids are kind of up against, and what they're being faced as choices, potential choices for their lives. So
absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, go ahead, Rolando.
That's amazing. Thank you. No, that's amazing. I think there's so much there, especially something to really think about. And I was talking about it yesterday with the group in Rio, is that grace that we need to ask for and give. Like, we need to tell our kids, you know what? I don't know anything. I'm starting to learn. I've got a whole curve. So let's work at this together, so that it isn't adversary, so that it isn't you and me an argument, and we've both got to learn. So let's have grace with one another, through all of this. I think it's very, very, very important. The goal of raising our children is to have love and fear for God, to serve them every day of their lives. That's what every parent wants with their child, right? We want them to know God. We want them to get close to God. We want them to make the word their standard. We see the train wreck coming when it isn't. But all we can do as parents is give the advice that I know we need to give, with loving, caring ideals, and then kind of almost take a step back and let them make their own decisions, but let them know that you love them unconditionally, and you're there to pick them up when they do fall, and they fall a lot. But so do we, don't we? Even as disciples, we fall. So even though that's the main goal, we need to do it not just by words, but by actions of love, of compassion, of understanding, of asking the questions, and being alert and wanting to be educated, because there's so much we don't understand. I had a conversation today with someone that's younger, she's 24, 25. And I was telling her some of the things of the questions that came up with the class that I was doing yesterday. And it's funny, she kind of looked at me and she said, well, aren't those things logical? And it made me realize what an age barrier there is, in a sense, where nowadays, yeah, it's natural. They hear about it all the time. It's being talked about all the time, but not for us. Like, we're in a curve and we need to catch up and learn and be educated with it all. We cannot fix them, but we must think about whether we are creating bridges or barriers with our reactions and conversations. Notice I said reactions and conversations. Reactions. Something that we must learn as parents is that good old poker face. I'll tell you, sometimes inside your brain and in your heart, you're going, no! You're going nuts in there. But we've got to maintain a face so that we don't scare them off, so that we don't react with something bad or adverse, and we can talk through and open conversations with them as a parent. This isn't an easy topic. This particular topic of homosexuality, of transgender, and all of these things that are involved with that are very confusing, because we bring baggage with us. That's cultural, that's religious from where we've come from, that's idealistic. We have a lot of opinions about this. All we've heard is how terrible and how incredibly bad it is. And even in the church, how this is the sin above all sins, that's the worst ever. And you know what? That's not true. Sin is sin is sin is sin. If we're going to put that about homosexuality, then we've got to say the same thing about selfishness, about pride, about all of those other sins that God talks about.
Rolando,
Some scriptures that help. Yes.
Sorry, I was just going to say too, I think that you're to speak to your point about reactions and about the whole things. I think that it's really important to, when this kind of stuff starts coming up, this is a really great place and a great time to reach out to somebody, to be very discreet, I think, initially with the people you speak to, but really to seek out some wise counsel and somebody to talk to. I spent lots of time walking away from my daughter and bawling my eyes in the bathroom. But somebody said to me way back at the beginning that it's not our children's job to carry our emotions. That's
you're right.
For them, right? So it's kind of like I needed to, this was for me to work out. This was my work, was to process these things and to support the best I could. So I needed to, and that's honestly, that's when I reached out to Guy. And but I needed people around me that I trusted, and to be able to just kind of walk through this with me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. That's a great point. Sometimes we can't help but react. You know the saying of ignorance is bliss? Not true. Ignorance is ignorance. And sometimes when we don't know things, we react in a really bad way because we're scared, because we don't understand, because we don't know how to react. Seeking counsel, I think, is an amazing thing. People that you do trust, that you can talk to, that you can pray together about, that you can start really realizing and moving and expanding the way that you think in order to be able to encompass them and help them as much as you can. You're going to notice through all of these, it sounds like a parenting class. We're going to talk about what to do with the kids. The reality of all of this is, no, what are we going to do with us to be able to help and react with our children the best way we can? So we always have to have that open heart. These are some scriptures that I think will help in putting our mindset and learning, and we can be more profound in all of these. Proverbs 12:18. Some people make hurtful comments, but the wise man's words bring relief. This is, I think, a great scripture in really visualizing either bridges or barriers. Depending on what we say, those things will be built. Let's be wise. Let's be praying. Let's seek counsel of how the best way to approach this and have those conversations that we really do need to have. That in most cases, we're not used to having. This is new in so many ways, right? Because we may talk about a lot of things, but I guarantee you almost across the board, this is not a topic that we've talked to our children about as they're growing up. Colossians 4:6, make your conversations cordial and pleasant so that you have the right answers for each person. This one holds a great deal for me because I have 3 kids. Like, most of you know, all three of them are different. My conversation can't necessarily be the same with all three of them the same way. So really taking stock of who you're talking to. What are their strengths and weaknesses? Where can you show love and compassion? Where can you really get in there into their heart? And we need to stop and think about that. We need to stop and think and pray about it so that we can really build, like, again, those bridges. Proverbs 25, human thoughts are deep waters. He who is intelligent, I like the way it says that, grasp them easily. Them easily. We're deep waters. We're complex human beings. And the things that we're going through are complex. Usually when a son or daughter comes out, there's usually been years of struggle, of stress, of insecurity, of doubt, especially within the church. Because our kids not only think, where does that put me with my parents? Will they still love me? Will they still care for me? Will they understand? All of those insecurities and all of those fears, the kids also think, how will the church react to my parents? That's another very hard burden to carry for a kid. Something Kathy said that's so important. It's not up to them to carry our feelings and emotions and our psyche, but yet they do. So we've got to be very conscious of all of this that's going on. It isn't just a flippant day from one day to another. There's usually been a great deal of time in there. Did you want to throw anything in, Kath?
No, I just think, just to reiterate that point, I think that just to also recognize that a lot of times when our kids have come out to us, they've already wrestled with this.
Yes, absolutely.
In a really big way. So it's not generally something that's kind of flippant. It is something that they've really, really struggled with, because they've felt, if they've grown up in the church, they know where we stand. And they feel the weight of that judgment as well. So absolutely.
Yeah, they definitely see everything. They've also heard us through everything, right? When we've been in groups, when we've been in different things, and we've come home and expressed our opinions about how the group went, they've heard everything. So they think about those things. That's part of their struggle. Yeah. Very important, communication and conversation. We've got to find the very best way always to open up communication, the bridges, right? Not close them. When you open up conversation, there's the possibility and the great expectation that people can go back and forth. In other words, you may not need to agree on something completely, but the conversation goes back and forth and you both learn. If we're doing barriers, no one's going to come back from that conversation. You'll have dead-end conversations. It won't grow. You won't develop that communication or that connection that we need. Proverbs 12:18, the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Colossians 4:6, let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Again, we go back to the same thing, right? It's a time for kids and family members. And I say this with family members also because all of us that have families that are dealing with this, we need to stop and think and pray for them, because they're going through a very difficult time, a time that can be terrifying and full of confusion. You don't know. In most cases, it's the last thing the parent thinks about, and now it's happening. They can look around sometimes, and we look around and we point fingers, right? Well, yeah, maybe it'll happen to them, but I don't think me. You never know. It's random. So we've got to be very compassionate with one another, very loving and very safe. Church needs to be a safe place, not a place of judgment and pointing fingers. I can't tell you, express to you, I'm sure the same thing happens with Kathy in dealing with parents. Sometimes parents are deathly afraid of even letting their church know what's going on because of the judgment that they feel will come for them and their children. This is God's kingdom. This is church. This should be the safest place on earth, where we can talk about anything and love up and have compassion with each other always. We've got to stop and think it's not just about words, it's about actions, isn't it? It's how we act, it's what we do. How we communicate sets the foundation on the relationship that will be built focus of every conversation can't be about the sexuality either. I think this is a great point too. When something like this happens and you want to talk about it, and there's same-sex attraction or there's transgender or any of those issues, it seems like the whole world focus that we have zeroes in on that part of the sexuality. And we forget that our children are much more than just their sexuality. They're intelligent, they're giving, they're loving, they're serving, they have great characters, they have integrity. Oh yeah, and they struggle with same-sex attraction. But we focus automatically on that and we can't. Yeah, Kathy.
I was just going to say, I think sometimes too, and I'm sure everybody's gone through this, you know, when you're carrying something really heavily on your heart, somebody says, how are your kids? You know, the first thing isn't going to be, you know, they're great. You know, I love them so much. They're so, you know, whatever. If there's something like this on your heart, it's just easy for it to be the only thing you're thinking about.
Yeah.
Like you're just sad, and you're sad, and you're grieving. You know, in a lot of ways, this is really just it's a grief process that we're going through, right? Like we're grieving all those. Oh, I wanted him to, you know, I had dreams for them. You know, we have dreams for them. So all of that sadness, sometimes that's the only thing you can think of. So I think this point is really important. And sometimes what we do in the parent ministry is we'll even get parents to write down, like just sit down and write down a list of all the amazing things about your kids.
That's awesome.
Just, you know, like, are they talented? Can they, you know, like all these things. And, you know, like just, and you know what, they're just all of those characteristics, all those things that you love about your kids, just really focus on that, because this is an issue that can easily start to define a family. And I've seen so many times where this just becomes, it's like the proverbial
bullseye of life. Yeah.
It's so heavy on your heart. And I think, again, even speaking to that, it's so important to be able to pray and to leave this before God, because this isn't, we shouldn't be using up our energy and our spiritual energy on carrying this. So something, and that's hard. I always say, you know, it was for me, you know, I thought all I had to surrender when I became a Christian was to be all and end all, right? But me surrendering my children and surrendering my daughter over and over and over again to God's plan has been a much greater work for me.
It is, yeah.
Just being able to not wanting to fix it, but having to surrender, and to surrender it to believing that God has a plan. And a lot of times too, I visualize in my mind, I'm going to pray about her and my children, and I leave it at God's feet. And when I come away from that, I can at least open up my heart to being able to love better. But
that's right.
A heavy thing to carry. It is a heavy.
It is. Thank you, Kathy. I'm so glad you said that, because I was like, I hope she says it. I hope she says it. There's an interview that Kathy has that you can see on the website of Strength and Weakness, that one of the things she says, and Kathy and I have been for a couple of years now blown away by it, and that's exactly what it is. She said, you know, I imagine a little box when I'm praying, and in that box I put my daughter and I put all of those things there, and then I put it at Jesus's feet, because there are things I can't handle. I can't deal with those things, so that I can't be so concerned with all of that and worried. Then I can't love as deeply, or I can't give as deeply. And really, it's a lot of putting it before God. God loves our children more than we do. You know that? So if there's somebody or something I want to put my kids in a box and give it, it's God, because he knows best. I think something that we deal with a lot too, guys, is the guilt that as parents we feel. The guilt of what did I do? What didn't I do? What's my fault? What should I have done? What should I have said? Maybe if I would have worked this out differently. And you know, the reality of it, guys, is God's in control of those things, and it really isn't our fault. They're decisions that our children are making, and whether we don't like it and we kick and scream and we should be different, We need to automatically, not automatically, but praying through, come to terms with, this is a decision now. I've got to deal with this terminology. I've got to deal with this world with them now. I may not want to, I may not understand it, but we can't just ignore it. And we can't just let our emotions deal with it. We've got to let them know that we're learning, that we want to understand. And that's how we'll be able to help them in so many ways and direction. And that's the point of a parent, right? To direct our kids. But we must do it with a lot of compassion and a lot of love. Again, the bridges are not barriers. Going back to scriptures for yourself. I'm not talking about Bible beating your kids, okay? This is what happens. We think that by reading all the verses to them and everything, that may change something. And it may, but the reality of it is, do you not think that your children know your convictions? At this point in time, your kids know what you believe and you don't. That's part of the fight they had for a couple of years and maybe coming out to you, because they knew what our convictions were. So to consistently keep going over them doesn't make any sense. All it does is it alienates, it separates. So how to love them with compassion as Jesus did, isn't that the center of it all? Not just talk about Jesus, but be like Jesus. And he was around everyone and he opened his heart to everyone. And as parents, I know that's hard. All of this, a lot of this sounds easier said than done. And yes, but this is where we're at. And if we're truly focused on Christ, as we read in the first scripture, that's who we hand it to, and we go growing with it. It has to do with where we're at. Sometimes we don't know how to answer. It can be emotional. Think of what is best, not just react. I know for me, being a good old Latin guy, I'm master of reaction. I've been so for so many years. I react to different things. And what I've had to learn with my children is how not to react, how to take things in, how to understand. And don't get me wrong, there's times when everything in me wants to blow. And I have to train, I've had to train myself to say, you know what? Can we talk about this a little later? Can we talk? I can't hear this right now, and not because I don't want to, but I need to wrap my brain and heart around this to help you the best. So let me go pray, or let's talk about this tomorrow. That's okay. What you don't want to do is say things that leave scars. Words are very powerful, and reactions are very powerful, and they definitely do construct walls at times. So we really need to pray and submit to God in those ways. And that brings about conversation. And conversation is something too, I just want to throw this in there. A lot of people have asked me, and yesterday I was asked several times, what age should you start talking to your kids about this? Not just the kids that are themselves have come out, but when do you start talking about this topic? There's a great article, which I'll actually put on Rome for everybody from Ellen Radcliffe, that's part of the group also, the Strength and Weakness staff, that talks about when to talk to your children and how to talk to your children about these issues. She puts down there, and I agree totally, from ages 2 to 35. Why is that so important? Obviously, maybe not 2 to 35, it's got to be age appropriate, but do you know that your kids, when they enter kindergarten, they're already starting to hear things in school about homosexuality and same-sex attraction and everything else? If we're not talking about this, when it comes time that they need to talk about it, do you think they'll talk to you about it? Well, if things aren't discussed, kids really grow up thinking, then these are things that aren't discussed. So I'm not going to discuss them with mom and dad. We need to start developing open conversation from very young, but obviously with our kids that are now. And something that was asked yesterday, and I'll just throw this in really quick, because it was a great question. They said, terrific. Now I'm learning about this. My kid is now 14, 15, 16 years old. Is it too late? Is it too late to talk about stuff? It's never too late. God's grace is sufficient, and it's amazing. We can apologize for being sometimes the knuckleheads we've been, because we've all been knuckleheads with our kids at one point or another. And we can move on and have the conversations about, let's have grace with one another. So it's never too late to start conversations and start learning and growing before God. Learn to be curious. Proverbs 25, the purpose of a person's heart are deep waters. We read about that. We need to ask a lot of questions. That does not mean that we're going to start interrogating our children. What, where, who, why? Let's ask open-ended questions and be able to have conversation and not bombard them with it either. We've got to balance that out. right? We don't like being sat down and have a light in our face and be interrogated for anything that we do we? We prefer the conversation. We prefer to be able to talk about things and to learn and to get deeper. Seek understanding how they came to that conclusion. Not with the answers of you're crazy, you're nuts, it's not true. To them, this is not nuts, this is not crazy, and this is true. So let's not belittle each other with that also. Let's validate what's being said. We may not understand it, but it's definitely being felt and understood on the other side. So we need to grow to understand it. Learn to understand what they're going through, the struggle they're going through, how they are feeling about it. Again, please understand, and God, one of the main things is about walking in other people's shoes, right? Not judging. Again, this is an action, not just words. This is what we live and this is what we should be doing. Understanding of what you're going through and how difficult this must have been. I can't imagine you wrestling with this as a child for so long. And that you didn't feel like you could come to someone and talk to them. So we've got to assume that responsibility too. For some reason, they didn't. And part of it is a lot of fear and everything else. But it's not a fault thing, it's an understanding thing, and it's a growing and it's a validating those feelings. Heart of curiosity and compassion, and draw them out, not closed-end questions, questions that draw out their heart. Definitely very important. Ask God for wisdom. Get on our knees. The biggest battles are won through knee work. Through getting on our knees, putting our face on the ground and begging God to teach us, to show us, to give us wisdom. And then having those great counselors around us, people we trust that we can talk to, that are secure, that are safe. Finding them. It's not the easiest thing in the world sometimes, but they're there. There's many people around us that really want to love us. Even if they don't understand, they can pray for us. That'd be a good thing. Asking how they're feeling about themselves. I just received a text yesterday. This is from someone in the group from my Spanish support group, parent support group that I lead. She sent a text because she went to pick up her daughter, and she and the workers were very sad, and she didn't understand why. So she gave her daughter and a friend of hers a ride back home. And they talked about this young man of 22 that the night before he had committed suicide. And then they learned through the story that it was because several months ago, he came out to his parents and basically was thrown out of the house by his dad and his mom. So what she writes on there is just stopping to think what this poor young man was going through in order to come to that conclusion of taking his own life. How devastating it was because he felt he didn't do the right thing in his parents' eyes, and the responsibility of it, and all of those things. When you know what? I talked about it in my class earlier. We can't help what we're attracted to. What we do with it is very important before God. But if someone hasn't made God their standard, they're going to go by, especially how the world is screaming all of this out, that if you feel it, you are it. There's not a lot of option. The compassion that we need to have because of the struggle that they go through. And unfortunately, and I'm sure Kathy is the same, through the years, I've heard of actual even suicides within the kingdom because of this same topic. That's extremely sad. This is the safest place on earth, guys. We have to live it that way. And we start with our children and the way we act and the things that we do. So we need to know how they're feeling. How are they doing? Every family is unique and different. So you need to find what fits with your family. It's not cookie cutter. I don't think anything is really cookie cutter. We have to find what works for us. Like I said, 3 kids, 3 different kids. I'm sure all of us experience the same thing. So it's not cookie cutter. Let's just pray about and ask about and do what we know needs for each individual one and pray about that. Kathy?
Yeah, I think that this is, these are really, really great points. And I think that all of us are thinking those are reactions we're talking about, Rolando. I think sometimes those reactions come out of our desire to want to fix something.
Absolutely, yeah.
Something, and sometimes the strength of those reactions comes out of that, I need to make this different. And I think that sometimes it's stepping back from that overwhelming need to fix something and to surrender all of it to God and to put our faith in action. But I think, in reading this slide, initially when I read this slide, I thought this is so great, but sometimes it's the ideal as well. In that a lot of times our kids, especially kids in the kingdom, they come to us just like we've been talking about with all of the struggle that they've gone through, come at us with a great deal of hostility and a great deal of defensiveness.
Yeah.
And sometimes it looks like there's just no place I can build a bridge here, because there's just their feeling, and also too, especially if they've connected themselves with peers at school or groups online, things like that. When you've got, like that whole, like Rolando says, it becomes them against us. So that becomes really difficult. And I really do believe that there is a place for us to show our bridge building expertise in silence. And
yes,
when I was first a Christian, my mom was living with this lady, and they tried to corner me often into having these intense conversations and arguments about what Paul said, and Paul was a woman hater, and blah blah blah, all these things. And I remember after a short time thinking, you don't really want to know. You just really want to pin me in a corner.
Yeah.
So I stopped arguing with them, and I went back to the scriptures, and when Jesus went to the temple and his mom was like, they went back and found him, and it said that he went with them and obeyed them. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to make every opportunity, or take every opportunity to serve my mom, to do what she's asked me to do.
Amen.
And I thought, in that situation, I knew my words, my beliefs weren't going to make an impact, but my life could make an impact, and my faith could make an impact in the way.
That's right. That's right.
So sometimes and again, though there were lots of moments that it was crying in the bathroom, when she cornered me or put me down or whatever, but I knew that being as close, just imitating Jesus the best I could, with the faith that I had was, the best that I could do at the time. And I think it's the same with our kids. Sometimes we have to become experts at, when our kids are little, we can gather them up onto our lap and we've created a moment. I think as our kids get older, we have to become experts at watching for when they open the doors.
Yeah.
Because, it's, I know with my son, it was the best time to talk to him was in the car, because we weren't looking at each other. So sometimes it's like finding something you have in common with them, doing an activity together. Driving's great, but those kind of things sometimes are just that's where you start building the bridge.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I kept thinking when Kathy was talking, it's exactly what we learn, right? That love covers over a multitude of sins. Sometimes all we can do is love. Just keep loving, keep showing love. And you're right. I think sometimes we want to fix it, especially I know in my life with my kids, I want to fix it. I'm the guy, I want to fix everything. And some things, it's not for you to fix. Just take it on. It's not for me to fix. Let me just shut up. It's true. Thank you, Kathy. That was amazing. That was great. Be compassionate. Colossians 3:12. Chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Boy, is that hard sometimes. But that's what God calls us to be, guys. That's the love that we need to have. It's a very emotionally charged time and subject. You don't have to have the answers right away. We just talked about that. We extend grace to our children, and we really ask them to extend grace to us. That's a conversation all in itself. As we extend grace to our children, we also need to exchange grace to ourselves. It's also okay to ask for grace from our children as we work through it together. Our children may have fear of judgment and whether they will still be loved. Across the board, that is one of the biggest fears that our children face. Will I still be loved? Will mom and dad still love me unconditionally the same they did before they knew And the answer has to be yes. We need to work through that because that unconditional love is all that holds us together. What holds us to God? I really appreciate something that Kathy shared at the very beginning about realizing how God did not treat her. He didn't point the finger, wag the finger, beat her over the head with the Bible. He didn't do any of that. He just loved us and let us make those decisions, the free will of it. But he loved us completely through it all, still does. So having really that as a deep conviction. So we need to be compassionate with ourselves, guilt, shame of what others may think. We talked a little bit about that. This being a marathon, not a sprint. Time to be united as parents, husband and wife. This is a time of total unity. We're in a battle, spiritual battle, Ephesians 6, right? If we're not united, we will fall. The battle will not be won. So we need to make sure, and I'll tell you something interesting too. It's not like husband and wife will agree on everything 100% all the time. That's not the point. The point is to talk about it so that they present an even front of love and compassion. Dads, and I say this as a dad, sometimes we take a back seat and we let mom handle this. This isn't a mom thing. This is an us thing. This is our child. So let's make sure that, guys, we're seeking the advice too. We're dealing in love. We're growing in love as a father and being that example to our kids. Did you want to say anything to that, Kath, or next?
Yeah, yeah. I was just going to say too that, I mean, the same thing with all of this is that, our kids have so many influences. They're all their media influencers, and there's all the things that our kids are kind of up against in their worlds. Is that really this is really a call for us to be our kids' influencers, to build the kind of relationship we want to have with our kids and have those conversations. And I'll tell you, there are some conversations that I've had with my daughter that, you know what, I would have been happy to live my whole life never having to have those conversations. They were hard. She was in dark places. It's been scary. There have been some very frightening times, but you know what, that we have to we have to do the work of building the relationship so that we can be the influencers in our kids' lives. And you know what, we can't finish our kids' stories. We can't
Important.
God has planned for them, and I do believe that God has a plan for all of our kids. But
absolutely,
yeah, we just can't. We can't know what the end is. So gotta keep.
Amen. I just want to reiterate, just in case, we cannot finish our kids' story. We see these situations, and what we think about is everything that we dreamt about for them, and it may be gone. It may not be there anymore. And we want to make it, and we think, okay, this is it. This is what it's going to be. We don't know their story. God does. So let's not finish our kids' story for them. Let's give them a chance to live their life and make those decisions, and God will take care of it all. I think that's so very important. Thank you, Kathy. I just want to talk about this really fast because, and we talked about it a little bit in my class at the very beginning. What causes attraction? Well, we don't know, but everyone should be treated with dignity, kindness, and respect, starting with our children and our family, okay? This isn't just for them out there. No matter what appeals to them, what they believe in, or how they choose to live their lives, we need to be respectful of people. We love the fact that we have free will. Then why do we keep choosing to take free will away from other people? Because of our perspective or what we think. Guys, everyone has free will, and we need to love everyone as such. I don't need to agree with you to love you. That's what Christ did. What causes attraction? We don't know. Is it in God's plan to have same-sex attraction? Not necessarily, but it exists like every other sin. God didn't plan for us to be the sinners that we turned out to. Look what Adam did and Eve, right? It's a lost world. Is it a sin to have attractions? Absolutely not, no matter what they are. What we do with it is what is important, and that's what we talk about, and that's what we try and teach, even when we start talking to our kids is very young. Fear, confusion, uncertainty, judgment, contempt, that's what our youth and children feel. We need to be very sensitive to that. Trusting others for them carries a great risk that staying hidden is kind of better. We can't be that way. We can't help people to stay hidden. We need people to feel trust and safety in what they talk about. And will they still be loved? It's the same thing that we talked about before. Possible tools, like we said before, preaching does not help. They know what we believe and they wrestle with it. It can be the hardest thing they've ever done and ever will do. Control our reaction, we talked about that, right? Communicate love at all times. Very important. These are tools that God has given us. We read about this every day. What do we pray about every day? We pray about God teaching us, showing us, maturing us, showing us how to love more. Well, this is answered prayer. That's what we're learning in an intense way. Listen intently, educate yourselves. Safe, open communication, loving, unconditional love, and intentionally work at helping them feel your love. I grew up with parents that were very traditional in so many ways. And what I used to hear is, I don't have to tell you I love you. You know I love you. You have a roof over your head. You have food on the table. That's where my love is. But guys, that doesn't cut it. We need to intentionally show love, right? The importance of recognizing the parts. Parents, we have our part. We do. The kids, they have their part that we should mention. We can talk about, but they have their part to do. And of course, one of the most important ones is God's part. He's in control, believing, having that faith. He does love them all more than we do. We all struggle, don't we? We all have stuff that we struggle with. We don't have to agree in order to love and have empathy and understanding. That's the basis of everything. The 3 parts. I need to control my own. And you know what I do by control? What I mean by control? Lots of prayer. Because the reality is we're not in control of anything. We want to be Christ-like, we want to love like God does and everything else. So that's what we're submitting to. Love, compassion, openness, and true communication. Build bridges, not barriers. Protect your kids. Protecting them means that there's a safe place to talk, to be heard, to be understood. Because I'll tell you what, if they can't do it at home, they will find a place to do it. And usually it's not the best of places, because of the world is teaching is total opposite to all this, right? To accept them doesn't necessarily mean that you approve of what they're doing, but you accept who they are and their decisions, even though we don't like it. But we accept them as people and we listen and we love them. Anything to close out, Kathy? I thought of Caring Beyond the Margins, which is an excellent book on all of this. It kind of deals with all of this in a great way. Did you want to close out with anything?
Yeah, no, that's great, Fernando. Rolando.
Yeah, Fernando, Rolando.
Sorry.
No, all good. Just so that you guys know, there's an amazing, of which Kathy is a part of, support group for parents in English. There's also Bob and Buena that are amazing couple also that help out with the parents ministry. You guys get together every week, no?
You know what? We have a mom's support group that meets the first Saturday of every month, and we have a parent support group that meets the third Sunday of every month. So we have a specific moms group and a moms chat, like a WhatsApp chat. That's a very supportive space, but we also do, have a support group specifically for our parents too.
That's great. And those groups are specifically for parents that have children that have come out and dealing with different situations. It's not just open for us, for anyone who kind of wants to learn more on the topic. There's other things that we can do with that, but these are specifically for those parents. And it's through Strength and Weakness being a member, which is $8 a month. There's also ways that you guys can talk with me, also get a hold of Kathy or any of them to talk specifically about stuff, one-on-one, if we need help. Send an email, please. So that we can get back to you if you need to. And anybody else, any questions, anything, we're open to whatever you guys want to ask, because we know there's so much confusion, so many things that we need to learn. So I hope this has been helpful. This is just kind of tip of iceberg with everything, but I hope that we've given at least enough tools, enough instruments, and talked about several things that I hope has given us confidence in being able to deal with these situations and our topics, and to help our children more than anything feel love and feel safe with whatever is happening with whomever. Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rolando. Are you taking questions? We have 2 hands.
We are. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm going
great.
to come off the sharing, and definitely we'll take, I kind of leave it open, but maybe like 15 minutes worth of questions and answers and stuff. So whoever wants to ask, let's just go for it. Just
Do you
raise
want
your
me
hand.
to record
Price.
this as well?
Yes, actually, I think it'd be really good.
Okay, great.
Price, I saw your hand up first, my friend. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Thank you, Rolando. Thank you, Kathy, for just
Here for
sharing
you, my brother.
your knowledge and the wisdom. I'm not a parent, Lord willing, one day. But I
Yay!
definitely hear your thoughts on as you know, we know the world has an impact and influence on children, you know, whether it's school or wherever
Absolutely.
you are. Do you think like homeschooling or like still, you know, allowing your kids in public schools has an effect on this, or like, would you think one is better, or it was just a thought that came to mind?
That's a great question. Kathy, what do you think? You're a teacher.
Yeah, you know what? I don't. That's an interesting question. A good question. I just don't think protecting keeping our kids out of having to answer those questions is really helpful, in that, I mean, they are going to be exposed to things in any setting, and they're even at church, honestly, anywhere.
Yes.
But it's I think the thing is, by having conversations and starting conversations early, like Rolando was saying, is that we get to at least have some influence in the narrative.
Yeah.
So I think that finding out what the school is teaching about sex ed and when they're teaching sex ed and all of those things, it allows you to be able to
Absolutely
look at those things through the eyes of faith. And I think it gives you lots of opportunities to talk about your faith. And
Yeah.
I always have, I mean, I have one regret as a parent and as a single parent. I was a relatively lenient parent, but when I look back on it, I wish in some ways there have been times that I'd said no more often, because I would have been able to explain why. And sometimes that why is a way of sharing my belief. And I didn't do that often enough by just allowing things to happen sometimes. So I think, yeah, sometimes having some control of the narrative is an advantage.
Yeah. One of the things I talked about yesterday to the parents were we do need to be watchful of our children. Nowadays, between computer and phone and people, they get into everything. We do need to be aware of what that is, and each family needs to decide what's the plan for them. But we do need to keep that open. Something to you too, Price, what you were asking. Great question. Thank you, Kathy, for your answer. I interviewed last year 3 different disciples that grew up in the church that are same-sex attracted. They were 25, 24, 21. And one of the things across the board that they mentioned to me, because I wanted to know what's your perspective growing up in the church, and what is your perspective on how same-sex attraction? And they said one of the main things is that it was never discussed in church, so they grew up that they wouldn't discuss it with anybody because it was something not to be discussed. So what did they do? Within the church, they got their friends that were also attracted, and they became their little mob, and they would seek advice from each other because they couldn't go to anyone else. So I agree with Kathy as far as we need to be careful not to put our kids in a shell either. We need to have the narrative. We need to have the conversation so that no matter where it comes from, we've talked about it. We're talking about this. Oh yeah, mom and dad talked about this, and they'll feel free to come back and talk more about it. But it all depends on us and how open we are to talk about everything, which is how it should be. Thank you. Thank you, Price. Yasmin, I think you were next, and then Magda.
Hi, good
Hey,
evening.
guys.
So quick question for that mother and parent support group. Is that only for disciples, or like for example, can we invite maybe someone that we know that is a parent of a same-sex attracted person to one of those groups just for their personal support
So
and benefit?
I'm glad you asked that. No, we're inter-Christian, interdenominational. Whoever needs help, we help with this.
It's
So
very
no,
faith-based. It's very faith-based, Bill, and
it
in
is.
order to access all of that, they need to be a member of Strength and Weakness. So it's
Right.
so they would yeah, it's very faith-based. So as long as that's kind of where their stance is,
Right.
or, you know,
We're
yeah.
not changing our narrative as far as God and all of those other things, but we know we need to help. So as long as they're aware.
Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, I understand that anyone is welcomed as long as they're open to faith.
Yep.
Okay,
Basically.
thank you.
Well, that's what they're going to hear. I don't know how open they'll be, but that's what they're going to hear. So, Magda.
Hey Kathy, hey guys, good job. This question is for Kathy. You were mentioning about your daughter. You were saying when at first you got shocked when you found out, but can you explain in detail how is it for you? You said you had to be gentle. Can you explain a little bit on that?
Just, you mean how I responded to her when she first came out?
Yeah, because part of it you were saying that you had to be gentle and go about it.
Yeah.
So then,
When she first came out to me, she was really upset herself, right? She I think it took a lot of courage to kind of come to me and share what she was feeling. So I mean, as a mom, you initially react to that. You initially react to this, your child standing in front of you in pieces, basically. And so I mean, I think at first it was just like I just wanted to protect her. I just wanted to hold her close. And then all of those thoughts start, like, oh my goodness, how am I going to deal with this as a Christian? How am I going to, what are the right words to say? What are the right things to do? What is the right scripture?
I mean, I've worked hard. I've done it before. So I was like trying to help her, trying to see. Oh, AJ. AJ that worked for the Miracle. Dang, what is going on here?
I'm sorry, somebody, can you please mute your audio? I can't see who it is. Okay, go ahead, Kathy, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Anyway, so I think that, but again, that was when, for me, I mean, after I'd gone away and prayed, and it was just like, I have to build bridges here. And so really it was that whole process of, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to build a bridge and not a barrier. And I knew that where she was at right at that moment, pulling out the scriptures or making her feel guilty or trying to fix it was just going to push her away from me. So I thought, you know what, I will do whatever. And what that meant for me was that I listened a lot, I cried a lot, I prayed a lot, I sought advice and counsel. I did. It was a lonely time though too, because there was a part of me that was afraid. I was afraid, what were people going to think about her? What were people going to think about me? So it was a very challenging time. But I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to love her the best I can. Yeah.
Right on.
Does that help,
Thank you.
Magda?
yeah, thank you.
Good. There was a question inside the chat that says, my question is, sometimes when watching TV, a commercial with some same-sex kissing is playing, I usually turn the channel until the commercial ends. Should I do that? But if it's a heterosexual couple that's kissing, I don't change the channel. Any advice on that? These are interesting questions. I'll tell you, they're unique. I hadn't had these before. one of the biggest things that I always say is education. So I don't necessarily believe in turning the channel, but I believe in explaining it if our kids are there. I believe in explaining that what God's process is and why, that we still need to love and have compassion, but that's not necessarily what God likes. And that's not how he put things together. So it's a chance to educate and a chance to open up communication, because you're talking about something and then it's a great opportunity to teach, in my opinion. And again, this is one of those opinion things, right? What do you think, Kath?
Yeah, I think, you know what? I think the things we need to remember is that the standard that we hold, our biblical sexual ethic, is based on our commitment to following Jesus.
Absolutely.
And you know what? And it's not just commercials, it's everywhere.
Everything, yeah.
Show that I've watched in the last couple of years, it doesn't at least somehow have a couple or something. It's something that's it's incredibly prevalent. So I think that to explain to our kids that, you know what we're a Christian family, and God's standards say that this isn't what
exactly
what, you know, God doesn't want. This isn't part of God's plan, and it's not part of God's plan for sexuality.
Yeah.
But those people have chosen to do that, and if they're not following God, then you know what? We need to love them anyway, right? Like
Absolutely.
again, like it's not. We have to be very careful not to teach our children judgment as well.
Absolutely.
But you know what? They've made a choice, and what we believe and our family believes is that the biblical sexual ethic is a man and a woman married. Right. That's where sexuality or the sex happens.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you. I want to throw something in there really quick too. Something that just Kathy said, and it just made me remember something. We have an ethic that we live by the standard, you know, the Bible and the church, definitely. But if someone hasn't made that the standards, we can't hold them to it. It doesn't mean that we're not an example, but we're also the example of love and compassion. But we also know that they don't quite know what we know. We came from sin. How were we when we were sinning? Did we know those things? No, because we didn't act that way until we actually studied. So our point of loving and compassion is to have a safe place where people can come and learn about God. Go figure. So I think it's very, very, very true, including our children, even though they know. But again, free will, right? You don't have to agree with things, but it doesn't stop us from being loving and compassionate. It didn't stop Jesus.
Yeah.
So,
now we have a hand. We have a hand
Yes.
went up. Fritza.
Yes. Thank you, Rolando. Thank you, Kathy, for opening to us.
You're welcome.
And are you open a conversation to a child 5 to 6 years old about that?
How?
How?
Well, Kathy, you want to go for it?
Yeah, no, I think that kids sometimes too, when kids are little, it's I would ask them a lot of questions. I would go look at that article if you can that Ellen wrote about talking to your kids.
I'll put it on the realm.
Yeah, I would ask them questions, because really you want to kind of meet them where they're at.
Yes.
You know, you don't want to explain, you know, go into an overt explanation if that's really, they can't even process that. Or just asking, you know, they might be using words that sound like, you know, they might be say, you know, like what's sex, but really they're just, what they really want to know is, why do people kiss? You know what I mean? Like, depending on the age of a child.
Right.
So I think that just ask some questions to find out really what they're asking and where they're at, and, you know, and then answer as honestly and as simply as you can. Kind of meet them where they're at.
Yeah. And so it's interesting, I think, because some of the questions that I've gotten from parents with younger kids is that they've seen, why does Bobby have two daddies? Or there's questions that the kids perceive, but they don't really know the whole foundation of it. But what a great opportunity to be able to say, well, you know, that's not necessarily what we believe is a Christian home, but we need to love them and, you know, be friends with them and we show Christ-like attitude. And that's what an amazing thing for them to learn. But you answer it, I agree, at their level. You can't go into a whole explanation of different things that they're not going to grasp.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. That's it. Cool. I don't mind ending now. It's almost a quarter of anyway.
All right. Yeah.
Kathy, thank you so much for being here with us. Isn't my family awesome?
Yes, they really are. It was great. Thank you. What a privilege to be here. Really, truly.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Well, this will be recorded, so it'll be put up. And actually, you guys have done a great job of like very quickly putting it up on YouTube and things. So thank you for that. And again, guys, we're always open.